All right, y'all, so leg day today, the exact same workout as last week, so don't look for anything exciting and miraculous there. Again, my workout structures, generally 90% of the workouts stay the same for months. There's occasionally exceptions when I might trade out an exercise here or there. If something's not working well for myself or not working well for Terrence, then again, might sub those out. But overall, a lot of it is once we pick movements that we know are going to fit well, we just run them into the ground for months and basically don't rotate until we stall, or again, we just feel like switching something up. Sometimes you start to get a little bit of itis stuff going on, a little inflammation here and there. So started today, again, our focus is a little bit more of a posterior chain, back of the body dominant leg day. So we started with banded RDLs and basically did the exact same thing as last week. I'm still basically just doing one working set there. It's a big movement, a lot of range of motion, a lot of load, a lot of muscles involved, and it also has a very good profile. That's the point of the bands. So when you have something like that, anything that is efficient, truly efficient, is also extremely taxing. There's no two ways around it. I think people get kind of confused about when they talk about trade-offs for certain exercises, for certain body parts, where they talk about the trade-off for how taxing it is. And there's some context to that as well too, because obviously you get to things that are a lot of multi-joints. But when you're training big muscle groups, again, that can move weight over a pretty good range of motion, even if you're biasing just some specific groups, it's going to be very taxing. So again, for me, my approach, and I'm not saying this is definitively right. Some people like to use a little bit more volume, stay a little bit shorter of failure to accumulate effective reps. Again, whenever I say effective reps, I always try and mention Chris Beardsley because I think he's the one that coined that term, which I think is brilliant. He's probably one of my favorite research guys out there as far as some of the stuff he tries to put together, a whole lot of research to actually kind of create some themes and patterns as opposed to just latching onto one thing. It's a little bit of a rant, but anyway, so he has the notion of a way to accumulate effective reps. You could do multiple sets short of failure, or you could get more effective reps in one set, training a closer proximity to the failure, which is how I tend to prefer to do them. All right, guys, breathing hard because I just got done doing deadlifts and so sweaty. It's because I got done watching cops. But I want to give 2 tips here for deadlifts, pretty much any type of deadlift. 1 is good for pretty much every human being, and 2 is a super secret pro tip I'm going to give at the end, so hang on for that one. No, but seriously, the first tip, I see one of the biggest mistakes that people in the bodybuilding world do, if their goal is putting on muscle, whatever, is when they go for their first rep of a deadlift, they go and they try and explosively, break the weight. And I kind of talked with Terrence a little bit about this today, not that he did that, but just gave him some things to basically think about to really make sure you're careful and cautious, especially with that first rep, whether you're doing conventional deadlift or an RDL or whatever, when you're pulling it off the floor. And realize, think about it, people don't think about really the position you're in at the bottom of a deadlift. It's like the same as if you had to start a squat at the bottom. So what if you had to take your PR weight squat, you had to get all the way in the hole in the bottom position and then get out? Would you get under that bar and just rip it up? No, you'd probably sit there and try and really take your time, make sure everything really feels good, feels tight, feels whatever. Because the reality is, that's the position from a muscle standpoint, from a joint standpoint, where you're exposed to the most force, specifically the most force in the shape of torque around every single joint you're trying to do. So at the bottom of the deadlift, that's where definitely your hips are exposed to the most force, and all of your vertebrae as well too, and everything along your vertebra. So in the bottom position, I would say really take your time. And you hear a lot of, obviously, in the powerlifting world, they talk about this for good reason, but it even goes double for bodybuilding. It's like, there's no benefit of being explosive. There's no benefit of ripping that off the floor. If anything, it's disadvantageous, if that's a word, disadvantageous. It's not good to just try and rip it off the floor. I say a good little thing that I like to think about, again, powerlifters will talk about just taking slack out of the bar. So again, literally, if you rip it and there's literally that little kind of jangle or whatever, I don't know if jangle is the right word, but that you can hear the clank of when the bar is kind of catching in the bearings of the collars before the weight even starts to move. So you'll see the whole bar kind of lift up, move an inch or two, and everything kind of catch before you get the weight, and then kind of find the weight on the way up. So powerlifters talk about literally kind of pulling that bar tight, taking the slack out of it. So as soon as you produce force, as soon as you contract muscles, when you move, the bar moves. There's no kind of in between. There's no that little like clanking whatever effect. And especially I say take it a step further. If you're in the bodybuilding world, I like to do like in my brain, and this can, when you get good at it, just takes half a second. I recommend, if you haven't done this before, have it take a couple seconds, but get yourself in position, take a second, get everything tight. So again, start to pull the slack out of that bar so it comes from keeping your arms. You see a big mistake too. If I ever see somebody that's got arm bends and everything's all loose before they pull a deadlift, I know 1, they're going to hurt themselves, or 2, they're nowhere near the capacity of what they could lift if you can lift shit with an arm bend. So literally take all the slack out, arms should be straight, pull the lats tight, brace your torso in midsection, and then I think down to my lower body, obviously pressing off the floor. And my brain, I do a slow ramp up to the amount of force it takes to pull that off the floor. So I just literally start to make everything tight as if I'm trying to pull with 20% of what I know is going to pull it off the floor, then to 50%, then to 70%, and then slowly, break that first rep. And then once you've broken it, get after it. And so I say, do that slow little ramp up, which again, when you're good, can just take half a second. So it doesn't have to sit there counting seconds to do that. But it's really a way to make sure, am I prepared? Is my body ready? Is I'm going to expose myself to this amount of load? And again, the most compromised, the most force producing position as far as actual joints and muscles are concerned. And then we were doing RDLs, so we're breaking it, kind of doing a conventional. And I would say especially that first negative. So we break it with a conventional kind of deadlift. And then into the first RDL, I say really take that first negative particularly very slow. Because in an RDL, when you're in that bottom position, that's the first time, again, even compared to pulling it conventional, your hips are going to be that far from the bar. All your vertebrae are going to be that far from the bar path. So again, it's really the first time you're exposed to that amount of torque at those joints. So take your time, make sure everything feels good. Because again, if you're going to get injured, if you're going to cheat, if you're going to have an issue happen, it's going to happen in that bottom position. So take your time there, take your time on that first eccentric, make sure everything feels good. And then same as every other exercise, be confident, get after it. I have people like, oh, how do I not hurt my back? And I'm just afraid. I've heard deadlifts are back for your back. Well, it's a complex movement. There's a lot involved. So done improperly, same as anything else, you can hurt yourself. It's just a little different than doing a curl. Getting some itis at the elbow isn't necessarily as bad as rupturing a disc or something. So I understand why there's a little bit more concern, rightfully so. But done safely, done properly, obviously you can load to the point where people, now are doing RDLs with 6-7 plates, craziness, and doing it properly and doing it safely. So just some things to think about on breaking your deadlifts, your first reps. And now for secret pro tip number 2. This is something that all the pros, best deadlifters on the entire planet do all over the world. Pre-set, you'll see people kind of pacing around, looking hardcore, getting focused. What you really want to do at that point in time is walk away from your gym partners, if you're respectful and nice, and get all your last farts out. So if you don't get your last farts out before the set, I'd say a pre-set fart has a sneaky way of turning into an intra-set shart. So write that down. So before the set, you'll see people pacing. Maybe people are thinking about hardcore stuff like punching people and, doing violent, angry, whatever really manly men do. I don't know anything about that. But the reality is the best deadlifters in the world are just sneaking around, letting those farts out so they don't have a pound of guacamole in their underwear post deadlift set. And again, maybe don't walk away from your training partners. I don't know what kind of relationship you guys have. You're just not going to be my training partner if you're that comfortable just sitting there farting in my face before a set. So that is your secret hashtag pro tip, along with some real actual tips for the next time you got a deadlift session going. Then from there, we went to seated leg curls, which is by far my favorite hamstring exercise. If I had to pick one, obviously I used 3 exercises in this workout that train hamstrings between the RDL, seated leg curl, and lying leg curl. But again, if my goal was purely hamstring development, which it has been in the past, typically we've started with that one. So move that to second. And then from there is a superset of leg extensions to lying leg curls. And all these are basically just 2 working sets. So taking 2 working sets, we're still just doing our top set to failure and our back off set just short of failure. And I should say our top set, basically 2 are slightly past failure, doing a force rep or 2 there. And our next one, not using a spotter, just kind of training right up to a failure point. And again, that's one little variable where as our recovery gets, stays good, and as we need to progress things a little bit, I'll probably add that set next will be to failure. And then from there, we went to hacks. So reverse band hacks. Again, the point of bands on hacks is just a better profile. And same thing there, we actually did 1 working set there. So our biggest movements, the most range of motion with the best profiles, are also the most systemically taxing. So again, I like the notion for every single thing that I do in the gym, every body part I train, as little as possible to produce the most results. So again, for bigger movements, I think arguably it just makes sense that, again, there's significantly more load over a larger range of motion compared sometimes to a single joint, maybe not as much range of motion. You don't need quite as much volume. So that's why some of our single joint things, we're doing 2 working sets, really big movements doing 1 working set. But there's plenty of times for myself and others where we've taken things up to 2 sets for big movements, occasionally even 3, but recovery really has to be on point, and it has to be necessary at that point in time where I really feel like progressive overload itself isn't enough to keep growing. All right, guys, so something to think about with hacks, and this is honestly a thought or a message that was relayed to me, and then I've seen him talk about it more, but related through Ben Pekulski always used to tell me about stuff that Milos would tell him when he was training. And I've seen Milos talk about this, and I've seen videos of him telling people this when training. talking about the notion of basically like looking for the pain when you're training, which I think is I don't know, depending on where you're at in your training journey, depending on your views of training, you might not quite understand that. And obviously, I'm not going to speak to what exactly Milos means by that because we've never chatted about it. But something that I do always think about is there for sure is, and this has to be some of the notion, people that come in the gym and really they're trying to avoid it, adamantly. And obviously that's the normal person response. But in the bodybuilding world, you got to realize, again, regardless of the semantics of you're trained to failure, not to failure, the last reps are the most important of your set. Those last reps are the ones that really change your physique. And those last reps are always the most painful. And so again, I think that's obviously, I think that is the reason so many people just shit the bed at the end of sets, because things accumulate. One, literally, there's a systemic effect from stuff, especially on legs. No one ever passes out from doing bicep curls. People pass out, people throw up, people shit their pants training legs. So there's just a lot of physical stuff accumulating that can make you foggy, lightheaded, and just extremely painful. So again, your lungs can be on a set of hacks, a set of squats, a set of leg press, something big and brutal, high rep stuff. You can literally feel the point where like your lungs are going to explode, you can't breathe, you feel like you're going to throw up, you feel like you're going to pass out. Not to mention just the pain of stuff in your legs, the accumulation, the byproduct of all that stuff from those contractions. And so I think it's a thing where, I don't care who you are, the first time you really start to train and train hard, which has to happen with someone else, the first time someone really pushes you to where you're capable of, it's like getting surprised. I always think of like the Mike Tyson quote, everyone's got a good game plan until they get punched in the face. And I'm going to say I've trained with a lot of big dudes, strong dudes, impressive dudes, and ladies, and I've metaphorically punched a lot of people in the face with the type of training they're not used to. I've seen a lot of people go deer in the headlights. And that's the reality is when you feel a level of pain that comes with heavy loads, good form taken far, the first time it should be surprising, unless you're just a lot tougher than me. I've been punched in the face many times. BPAC metaphorically punched me in the face many a time our first several leg sessions. But the thing is, I think once you realize the level of pain you're going to experience, you can anticipate it, you know it's coming, you really need to start looking for that. You need to start to anticipate your response, knowing that it's coming. And so I think it's just something to give insight to what I think about, and I'm sure people that train harder than me and are more badasses than I do think about this to some other level. When I'm coming into my hardest sets, again, it's not on bicep curls, it's not on press downs, but when I'm doing a brutal set of hacks, especially if it's higher rep, especially if it's a drop set, that kind of fog's gonna set in a little bit. It's easy sometime in a long set to get distracted and not focus in the middle of the set. But as I get to the end and I'm looking for I'm really thinking these are the reps that I came for. I almost get impatient sometimes. If I know, obviously looking at my logbook, I'm gonna be somewhere around, I'm never gonna be way off. I'm not gonna be 10 reps more or less than I think I'm gonna be. If I know the top set's gonna be 8, 9, 10 reps, as I'm moving through reps 4, 5, I have to control myself not to get impatient, still make those reps count. But when I get to the ones where I know I'm kneel failure, I'm going to train past failure, I start to recognize here's the pain coming, here's the worst pain of the set, and just kind of double down on, I'm going to make this eccentric even slower. I'm going to make this last, coming out of the hole even less of a bounce. I'm going to get to my favorite point is when you get up to that sticking point where if you didn't have somebody there, you'd get buried and you'd die. And there's still that half second, even with a good spotter, where you can feel them grab the bar and start to spot you. But that minute of that realistically probably 1 second of not moving feels like 30 seconds when you're in there. And it's really hard not to just bail out, quit, just give out altogether. And it takes some practice to actually just double down in that position, just still pushing and contract as hard as you can with the things you're actually trying to use to train and to make it through those points. And again, I don't like the metaphors of we're going to battle and blah, 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 and all that shit. I'm not trying to impart that this is something super important or challenging relative to the whole rest of the world. But it is something worth thinking about. Obviously, if you're spending time in the gym, you're trying to get the most out of it. Think about your approach on those last sets, those last reps, and start to train yourself to recognize what's coming. And again, the reality is your natural response, I don't care who you are, unless you're a weirdo, is most people don't like pain, like actual pain. No one's like, oh, this is fucking great. Oh, I look forward to it. Your natural response is to bail out, is to stop whatever you're doing causing pain. Self-inflicted pain probably isn't something that's hardwired and is normal. So it's normal to want to quit. And you can just continually train yourself to know what's coming. Start to, again, the way I think about what Milo says is I start to really focus on that pain that I feel. I'm like, this is it, here it is. And just realizing you can tolerate it. I can make it through this. This is the most painful part right here. I'm just gonna stick with it. I'm gonna grind through it. And again, Milos, if you're watching this, you can tell me I butchered your whole quote and what I'm talking about. But for me, that's the things that I really think about is if you know what it is, you recognize it, you think about it, you focus on it, and then in spite of it, double down on the things you came there to do. That's, in my opinion, what changes physiques and produces results. And again, cue the dramatic music. But again, so seriously, not too dramatic. Again, I'm not in the whole we're soldiers going to battle, this and that, because if I was a real soldier watching this that's been into battle, I'd be like, go fuck yourself. So again, in the gym though, it's some things that, again, I do think separate people that just do okay, go through the motions, and people that continually bail out from the spots, where you're actually going to change your physique and continue to produce results. And then from there, we finished with split squats. So pretty much every single thing over the course from last week to this week, if you're looking at what kind of progressive overload looks like at this point, I did 5 more pounds for the same reps on RDLs, same weight, basically kind of a half a rep more on the seated leg curl, which is what it looks like sometimes. Lying leg curl was pretty similar weight to last time. Hack squat was same rep range, but up in weight. And then we finished with split squats. And then last week we only did body weight there, and this time just did a top set with a little bit of added weight. So just a little progression on everything from the previous week, and that's really the goal. And we've got weeks and months ahead of us, especially again, particularly for Terrence and his off season. So we're just looking at nice, steady, manageable progress just from session to session. Not looking for anything crazy or drastic. Again, with rare exception, we got somebody that comes in town and we just want to beat the shit out of them. There'll never be this crazy jump in volume or crazy jump in sets to failure, things like that. It'll just be a slow, steady add up, as long as recovery can tolerate it. So that is the leg day. As always, hopefully you found some things in there interesting, beneficial, helpful, whatever. Leave me any comments, feedback below. Hit that thumbs up button. Share, subscribe if you haven't already. And until the next one, guys.